deeper. You are not a typical VC. You spent 25 plus years in product innovation, co-founded Happen Group, which is acquired by Accenture. You helped generated billions and billions of incremental revenue for clients, and you won multiple European design and engineering awards. Welcome to the podcast, Costas.
Thank you, Joe. Happy to be here.
So really looking back, right, when you connect the dots, maybe even back to your childhood, what
hmm
do you think has made you become the VC you are right now at Terra?
That's a good question. So first of all, there was never the intent to land like I'm now 53 years old, to land where I am now. If I try to connect the dots, there probably are dots I can connect. So I probably, like many children, I enjoyed making drawings and making things. And then of course, when you make a nice drawing, you show it to your mother or your father or your grandmother and you say, "Hey, do you like what I made?" And I guess I was lucky throughout my early teenage years to sort of retain the urge to do creative things and make things, which put me on the path of choosing design engineering as a let's say graduation topic. So I went to the Technical University of Delft here in the Netherlands where I live and became an engineer after that, doing literally that, product design, understanding how things are made, designing machines, literally manufacturing environments. And after about 10 years of professional life in that direction, I guess was an important sort of new dot, because I'd gone from making drawings to make my parents proud, through to learning how actual things are made in mass markets, through to realizing that also my career, in a way, I won't say it was going stale, but I was in a position that I realized, okay, I've now understood how to make things, how to get them built, and how to make money out of that. But the problems only become bigger as you start working on more complex products. You don't really necessarily learn new things. So I shifted into innovation consulting with a couple of friends, set up an innovation business. And what is interesting then is you're no longer being asked to come up with the ideas yourself, but you're being asked to help create the ideas and to basically analyze what's going on in a particular environment, in a particular market, in a particular company, and agree with the client how to do new things that actually make money that you can sell. And in a way, this last step, sorry for this long answer, but this last step of going into VC is an extension of that, because I've gone from being paid for creating ideas to being paid for informing how to create ideas. And now I'm being basically, I make my money by asking people who also have money to co-invest with me, to say, I think I found a business that is on the path to something great. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. Join me. And so it's all different ways of making new things happen in market, and increasingly, I won't say at more distant, but at more as a guide, rather than having the burden of to create all those new things myself.
And that's the thing, right? Is that at the first 10 years of your career, you're like, okay, we are directly in the path of doing it ourselves. And then you
hmm
slowly transition into like the innovation agency where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm kind of just taking a step back because I have all this knowledge and it might just be more efficient and more effective for the world if I just guide all these founders, guide all these companies that need the ideas to be evaluated. Because like, why would you want to spend like billions and billions of dollars on just some dumb idea and some, shiny revolution that we're going to talk about later? So could you talk about maybe like in your previous roles, right? Like what are
Yeah.
like the things that are the most transferable? Engineer, founder, like,
That's a good, very good question again. I think I have been, of course, I've been lucky, as everyone probably has some degree of luck as they progress through a career with different roles, different things to do. I was a pretty okay engineer and product designer. By no means stellar or like superb or anything like that. But when I came into this new world of innovation, in particular, let's say in corporate environments and consumer goods, where you could say the innovation responsibility lies with marketing teams, I realized that I had a massive benefit by knowing how things are made, which typically marketing innovation teams don't know. They simply, it's not the type of person. These roles will be fulfilled by people with marketing backgrounds, usually not, let's say, R&D or production backgrounds. So they always struggle to think about their future from a product portfolio point of view in things they know they can make affordably. That's why so many innovations fail. It's really as simple as that. It's because ideas are put to market that are too expensive for the company launching them to actually make sustainably. So that was a huge benefit coming into that domain, and it was a benefit that you could say for myself, my fellow founders, and eventually the team that we grew. It was just a tremendous asset being comfortable, not just talking about what the market wants, but what can you actually make in a commercially viable way. It's a really fundamental truth, which, again, if you're working for a small company, which is actually quite striking, if you work for like a small, medium-sized enterprise where the marketing team and the factory and everything, they're all in the same building, this problem doesn't exist. But if you talk to multinationals, where you'll have R&D sitting in Hong Kong, you'll have marketing sitting in Los Angeles, and then you'll have, let's say, a production team somewhere in Eastern Europe. These people will not sort of sit in each other's, say, day to day, and they will have very potentially, say, divergent motivations in what they're being asked to do. Like, and that's also why the reason why very many of these huge companies are absolutely excellent at making better products that are more expensive or cheaper products that are a lot worse, but they are not very good at making affordable products that are better. And that's, you could say, a benefit that smaller companies have. Now, so understanding how things are made is a huge benefit. At least was a huge benefit for me coming into my second career. And in a way, when we started Unaterra, between, let's say, myself and my fellow founders, we were a bit of an oddball group coming into the world of VC, because we were one of the few coming in with absolutely no financial background whatsoever. Our backgrounds are all in industry. I came through, let's say, product engineering and consulting. My fellow founder, Luca, came in, you could say, basically it's last job before this was in the packaging industry, heading up a huge, say, films and foils division of a business called Amcor. And you could say as a group, we were much more, I guess, product and physical product oriented than we were about how do we finance young companies to grow. And that was almost secondary for us. Our main interest is this a great company, and are they doing something which is going to work in the real world, rather than some dream where you need either way too much luck or too deep pockets to get it to succeed. Yeah, it's again a bit of a meandering answer to your question, Joe. Sorry for that, but it's just the stage, I guess, the professional stage I've now landed in. And again, my fellow founders are all the same age, roughly same profile, of just realizing, oh, hold on, this is actually quite interesting. If you have the experience to sort of be able to spot what is going to work and what not, well, you might as well just give this team money rather than getting too close involved yourself, and do this, let's say, on a yeah, what I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, like, how did you meet your founders, and then suddenly this idea of VC has to pop up, right? Because you guys don't really
No, no,
are
it's
the
slower than that. It's much slower. And this is almost impossible to imagine if you're not as ancient old as we are, that things actually happen slowly. But imagine it was actually, I mean, I can just, like, the actual how it happened was when we sold the agency, which was in 2019. So that's 6 years ago already. I was basically working in Accenture, who had acquired our agency to help integrate the business into Accenture. And Luca, my fellow founder, who's now the CEO of Unaterra, he was a former client. He was a client when he was at Amcor, and my agency helped his business become more innovative, understanding better what customers want and creating solutions that, again, work for both the client and the business. And I always got along with Luca. I mean, I really enjoyed being around him and the way he thought. And he came to me knowing I was no longer running the agency, so I probably had a little more time on my hands than before. And he said, "Hey, listen, we've come across this really interesting company called Pulpex, which he was looking for basically amongst friends and family to see if he could collect some money to do, I guess, what a VC person would call a club deal." I mean, I had no idea what that meant. I'd heard of angel investing and I'd heard of VC, but I had no idea what all the structures behind it were. But anyway, I knew this company because another client of mine, Diageo, used their product basically at small scale, but they used it. And that business became a template for what we do with Unaterra. So what this was about was basically a paper bottle, and we're talking, what is it, 2021 now, so 5 years ago. Paper bottle, which is by no means special in itself, because everyone was working on a paper bottle back then. I mean, you could have probably picked like 40 or 50 different startups to invest in if that was your interest, because everyone could see that there's probably a benefit if you can switch away from glass, switch away from plastics in single-use bottles to something paper-based, which is easier to recycle. But the one thing Pulpex did quite differently was they had a bottle you could fill on a normal filling line. And whereas every other paper bottle you would look at back then was pretty much academic, trying to create the perfect compostable, recyclable, whateverable form of paper container, and not really being too bothered about will a customer actually be able to use it without investing into new lines? And Pulpix understood that. So for us, it was a fairly obvious, you could say, thing to put some of our own money in to help this team grow, because they were doing something we knew our old clients from our previous lives would love it. Because again, if you have, I mean, just imagine, but just literally, just imagine, just for the sake of the argument, if you're working on a new bottle which is intended for single-use consumption, and you're saying, okay, we're going to make this paper bottle, and it's going to conquer the world. And if you just think of a business, let's say like PepsiCo or Coca-Cola, who have probably the equivalent of $10 billion worth of filling lines across the planet. And you come along and you say, hey, I have this paper bottle. By the way, it won't work on your normal filling lines. So you're going to have to buy new ones if you want to use our product. Do you think they will ever say yes to that? Of course not. They will never say yes to that. Nevertheless, everyone else was working on that. So anyway, long story short, what Unaterra does is we look at, you could say, what is the materials transition. We look at making things more circular, which means in practice, develop cleaner materials that are easier to recycle, easier to basically keep in the system rather than it ending in trash somewhere on a waste heap, but do it with respect for the old infrastructure that already exists. Because the infrastructure isn't wrong or anything, it's just not initially designed to process some of these cleaner materials. But if you can make that work, then it might actually become something which is very, very easy to grow. Because the one thing a factory loves is not changing the factory. They love just sort of pulling materials in and putting beautiful product out. If you can make that easier, more seamless, more frictionless, then you're almost automatically onto a winner. And that's what most of the businesses we've invested in since have in common, is they understand the market they're in, the production side.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of just really started small, right? And then you're like, okay, well, I didn't know what this was. And then somehow along the journey, you're like, so this was angel investing. This was VC investing. And
Yeah,
that's the important part, right? The old infrastructure. If you can somehow blend into the system with as little friction as possible, as little risk as possible, then it's something that can scale very quickly versus like, what are you going to do, right? Like you're going to tell every single factory, buy this new thing and replace your entire structure. Like which factory is actually going to do that? Pour millions of dollars doing that.
zero,
That's just not worth it, right? Yeah,
zero.
zero, like you said. So there's absolutely no way for companies to really succeed if they don't use an existing type of infrastructure, which is really, really interesting. So for you, right? I know you wrote like a bunch of books on this. Like you are a monster in terms of writing successful books.
The volumes are not necessarily very high, but they have done me well writing them, because I don't know. Have well, you're still quite young, but have you had the chance to write something resembling a book? I know you're doing the podcast, which is quite amazing to say at the life stage you're in already. But writing books is really good to form your opinion and your ideas, because you're putting something to paper which will then be read by others. And I started doing this when we had the agency, and it was quite scary to start with, as in, shit, am I offending maybe some clients when I just write what I actually think about how this works? And then you realize most of your clients are already your clients because they like working with you and they understand what you're trying to do. So most of our clients loved the books I wrote, and the few who didn't, they just didn't get it. That's fine. Made no one angry. But maybe there's a deeper thing hidden in there, Joe, which is, and this is, and in a way, something I wonder when I look at some of the other VCs out there. And to be honest, I'm not really preoccupied with what other people are doing, but it does strike me, particular in say in the context of impact and doing things that are better for the planet, because that's you could say the higher order goal, of course, of what we're trying to achieve. Is it seems so many of the people in the VCs themselves, they come from my finance background and know everything about finance, about banking, but not necessarily very much about the topics they're investing in. And I don't understand how you do that. I just honestly don't know, because how would you ever be able to judge beyond the numbers whether something is going to work or not? And I mean, the only topics we can, as Unaterra, invest in are the topics that are about making products, making physical things, because that's what we know, sort of how to judge, let's say, not necessarily good from bad, but potential and no potential, because none of them will be, well, there are some really bad ones, but most of them are okay. And then how do you see the nuance of the things that are higher, have that higher chance of succeeding or not? I mean, if you have to go outside and get experts on board for every single deal, that's going to be complicated.
in terms of that, right? Like I want to hear your thoughts. So in every single VC, we're talking early stage here,
Hmm.
there's like three big things, right?
Hmm.
And let's first talk about like what is the three big things that you look for in startups?
Okay, so and that's I guess assuming we're already looking at a group of startups or startups that we know are doing something which is around sustainability and circular economy, because that would be like the important thing for us to fit within the thesis we've agreed with our investors. Okay, so somewhat cynically, but the first question is, does this startup promise something that is not in violation with the laws of physics? It's getting better. It's absolutely getting better, but that was not the case when we started. I mean, I would dare say 5% of the startups we looked at were actually promising something that was just physically impossible. And they would probably know, but they would still try and get away with it. So we are talking Series A in our case. We don't really do before that, so that's maybe one thing to keep in mind. I mean, there are some businesses that are sort of on the let's say just on the cusp of switching from like pilot trials with customers to actually winning, let's say, production volumes with customers. So what would be the if they are not violating the laws of physics, which they cannot do by the time typically we get involved. Funnily enough, probably the most important thing, even more important than talking to the founding team and the people on board, is I want to talk to a customer. And I want to talk to a customer to understand, is that customer really experiencing a problem solved? Because that tells me if they are genuinely interested in the product. So, and it's quite a profound thing. It goes actually back to, I think Mr. Peter Drucker once said, the purpose of a company is to win clients, nothing else. And it's quite a good one, because if everything else comes from that, if there are no clients, there's no company. Which is also why I personally always get a bit itchy when very young, small startups who have not made a penny yet, but maybe are very good at raising cash, talk about themselves as a business when they are technically no more than a hypothesis. Because until you have a paying customer paying market prices for your product, that's when you turn into a company. Now, so I would love to talk to a customer, because that will tell me everything about what the company is doing, how easy it is to order from them, the quality of their product, and very importantly, also the reason why they're buying it. And this is another interesting thing, because in the world of sustainability, I mean, everyone by now has understood there is no such thing as a green premium, definitely not in our world. So if you're making a material which can replace another material in a cleaner way, still switching from the old material to the new material has to be paid by someone, and will have to be paid by the material itself, which means if the product is not cheaper, at least it needs to be performing better such that the money can be made somewhere else. So it's a very simple mechanic. This is, I guess, also a real benefit we have. I mean, some people might describe it as a handicap, but I think it's a huge benefit. When you work in the circular economy and you're doing new products for very mature markets, actually this goes beyond circular, but if, let's say, if you are launching products into a mature market, the one thing that is not a secret is what the product can cost. It's very clear what the product can cost, because whatever you're replacing is telling you how expensive you can be or how cheap. That's your goal. So a second very important question for us is, given we're usually looking at physical materials that need to be made in some form or other, and I guess the business term is, will the unit economics work? Is there a way to make the product the business is saying they can make at scale for the price it needs to be made? And again, because it's usually technology and physical things, it's not necessarily easy, but it's not impossible. It's not rocket science. You can sort of navigate your way to figuring that out. And then, of course, yes, it is still important that the founding team is a coherent bunch. Ideally, not one person as the mastermind behind everything and doing everything. But by the time, again, we get involved, which is Series A, it has to be a team. It has to be a team that is, I guess, in line with what I just said, customer focused and not investor focused, which is, I think, something. It's also one of these things that has really surprised me over the past, 4 years coming into this space. We'll be talking to young companies who have no concept of what a customer really looks like. They're only focused on the investor because they've been taught that's what defines the value of your business. And I'm just thinking, no, that doesn't define the value of any business in my book. It's what's the value of your output. That's going to define the value of your business. And it's now you could see that's sort of where the world we operate in, again, which is physical materials and sort of literally barrels of powders and stuff. That's sort of where the circular economy exists, is so different from, let's say, the Silicon Valley version of VC, which is all about digital promises, about never I guess, hopefully never having to figure out how cheap your product is actually going to have to be to sell, but being able to keep the dream going. Probably the most fundamental difference between, I guess, what is the cliche type of VC and VC company you're investing in versus what we're investing in is the cliche wants as much disruption as possible, wants as radical, crazy new thing with as many different things attached to it, with this sort of winner takes all attitude. Whereas in the physical space, physical products, physical materials, whether it's end user products or just raw materials somewhere in the chain, you want as little drama as possible. You want the one important change versus what was there before, which is true for as many potential buyers as possible, not drama. And again, this is so these worlds are sitting almost like at opposite ends of a spectrum from that point of view, which I find fascinating. But it's also a way to distinguish, in a sense, good companies from bad ones. Because if you're looking at like a startup looking to become a scale up, which says we have a new product and we're going to sell it in a completely different way, and we have this totally new production system to make it. And by the way, whatever nature did, we're going to trump what nature does. Then they have this all sort of array of extreme disruptive thinking around the product on every possible touch point for the world around it. You kind of know, well, that's just never going to work. That's just too hard. Because in the physical space, I mean, everything is boxed in, literally, and it's going to be hard to change just one thing. If I have a product that is different from what people are used to, for God's sake, let me make it so that they can buy it in exactly the same way as they're used to buying this kind of stuff. And again, it's going to be really simple. I once had it was a pitch for a colorant. Funnily enough, we've just invested in a colorant, and this was a colorant which was powder based, but I knew the type of client they were aiming at only does liquids. That's kind of, you have to have a liquid, otherwise no one's going to be able to put your product in their machines. And they said, yeah, no, but the powder version is just much greener. It's better for the planet and everything. And I said, that's all true, but I don't care if it's better. I care that it's good enough and I can sell it, because if I can't sell it, you could be better than anything. No one's going to enjoy that benefit. And again, it doesn't need to be very hard. But here's a thought for you, back for you. Is if I think about everything, we've made a lot of mistakes, but the things we've done well are connected to experiences we've had in the past. And the fact, luckily, that most of us on the team have relatively long careers already. If I would look at you, Joe, and think, okay, so what would be a topic you would excel at VC? And I look at your LinkedIn profile and I see you've been part of you're a violinist and you've played in an orchestra. So I'm thinking, what angle would you be able to take in the world of music investing, for example, where you would be able to recognize from the experience you have something that someone else wouldn't be able to see? What would be good?
For example, the instrument is made out of wood, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
if the factory is like a factory that processes wood for some type of shape within the instrument, then let's say all factories are like that, then you wouldn't want to just like say like, oh, this new metal material is like as comfortable as wood and maybe even more long lasting. So you should just like process these metal into these instrument shapes instead. You would only allow, if it's an innovative product, aka innovative wood or some different type of wood that you've seen, if the factory can only process wood, you can give that, but you can't give the metal.
Yeah, so that's you would have to start by on the factory side and see, okay, so why are they doing it the way they're doing it, and what is the benefit? And it has to be a big benefit for a production environment to switch from one raw material to another. But if the benefit of switching, whether it's metal, maybe it's a different kind of wood or it's a particular sort of material you're creating, if the benefit comes with less reject on the line, so less unforced errors made in production, or it's easier to glue, or for the end customer, just simply better sound. I mean, there's all these other benefits that can come into play where someone running a factory or maybe a whole chain of factories will say, hey, I actually like this idea. I'm willing to spend $1 million updating my lines or $10 million updating a whole set of factories because I see the benefits there are worth it. But again, that is very quickly you get into a domain where it just becomes such an obstacle for the amount of investment you need to do that it's not worthwhile. And that's really the play. And I guess the reality is probably true for almost every startup, including most of the digital ones. But the reality is you will never launch into a vacuum. You will always launch into an existing market. And that by that means, by definition, that someone you're trying to sell to, as in a customer or a consumer, has choice. They can choose. It's not that they need to be convinced to suddenly buy yours on top of whatever else they're buying. No, it means they need to stop buying something to switch to your solution. Well, that's basic positioning in marketing. I mean, how are you going to explain that it's worth it, that switch? And it's pretty hard in practice. And it gets only harder in business to business when you could say, when the cost of getting it wrong is higher. So yeah,
So if it's like that,
yeah.
that kind of hard, right? Like when you're looking at those pitches within 5 minutes, like you said. So how do you do it? Is it just like kind of instinctive for you right now, or do you just have to pull up like tools, like for example AI? You say like, okay, so what does this material do? What does factories do in this case? Like, do you still have to pull that up, or
Yeah,
do
of
you just
course. Yeah, yeah.
instinctively know it now?
Well, you instinctively know whether it's, and you could be right or wrong. It's just, but the instinct will tell you, is this worth spending time on? And in most cases, when we spend time, when we choose to spend time in the conversation throughout the whole sort of getting to know the business, then in due diligence, well, it's only a handful where we've decided then halfway the journey, no, this is actually not what we thought it was, or we actually see there is a problem and it might not work. But typically once we start the conversation, I would say there's a more than a 50-50% chance that we'll go all the way to the end. Then there might still be, and this is just the reality, the problem that you realize, hold on, I cannot actually explain this the way I want to my investors. So there might be a reason at the very end still not to be able to make the investment. But I would say in our case, and this is, I can only guess this is true for many companies, is the gut sense of, does this make sense versus everything we've seen before, is a very good starting point. And but of course, yes, we have the due diligence process is way more than just a gut feel, and we have, I think, some interesting lenses to look through to decide whether or not a particular, say, technology or business idea is scalable. What we know what to watch out for. Maybe an interesting thing. There's some lenses we look through. Um, which work very well in physical materials and also, for example, food ingredients. An important one in food ingredients in particular is, to say, a lens which I could, besides looking, will it fit infrastructure and things like that, but does it also respect the local culture in which you're trying to launch? And this is funny because this is actually from my old days in the consulting era. I mean, the number of clients we had that wanted to go down the route of alternative proteins is huge. And the startup world in that space is huge. But for God's sake, don't try to do center of plate, as it's called, where literally the heroic product in the middle of the plate is some kind of, and you can see it. What happens when you do Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger? They're going down the tubes because they are over promising and under delivering. And it's not just pretending you can make a great burger or a nice sausage, but I mean, I live in Europe. There's a lot of, let's say, traditional cuisine here, and of course, everyone young moves on to pop culture foods. But imagine an Italian grandmother saying, "Oh, I'm going to make this meatball recipe using some plant-based protein." Hell no, never. So, I mean, it's an important sort of thing to keep in mind is, will the market you're trying to launch your product into, whatever the product is, have cultural elements which just mean it works in a certain way. And don't expect you can dramatically change that overnight. It might take generations. There is another angle which is also particular, let's say, in the more hard tech, so things like packaging materials or because of electrical solutions, is asking yourself, okay, the solution I'm seeing or being presented to me is clearly an improvement over what there was before. But is it actually as good as it could ever be? Or might I find myself investing in this new technology and then a year later someone comes along who has something even better? And funnily enough, you can actually predict this. There are ways of, say, looking at what kind of benefit a product brings to realize if there's wide open space still around it to do way better. A very easy way to imagine what that's like might sound obvious, but you'll be surprised how non-obvious it is. But if you look at, for example, electrical car charging electric cars is cumbersome because it comes with this cable you need to stick into a car. Not different from, say, how you would put gasoline in a car, but of course you need way more time with electricity. So the whole thing is cars need to be charged when they're parked. So you can leave them there for an hour or however long. You will not believe how many startups there are out there creating some kind of mechanical unit which would come out of the ground and plug into the bottom of the car to then charge it. So, I mean, even if you would just forget for a second that there's not a car manufacturer who is going to just work with some startup to create a plug in the bottom of their car to enable this. So that's fantasy for that reason to just to start with. But the mechanical character of these solutions are by definition going to be like completely blown away the moment someone creates a wireless solution. And wireless solutions for charging already exist. They just don't exist on the size of a car. So then so why on earth would you ever invest in any one of these robotic plug and etc. arm in solutions when you know the winner is not going to be one of these, but the wireless one? And this is a sort of a line of thinking you can take into a lot of, say, scanning of ideas. Are they just like an intermediate step between the old solution and what is going to be the better solution, or are they actually the definitive better solution? If you just take and there's like 10 different sort of angles like that you can take onto any product idea, and you'll very quickly realize if you're onto a winner or if you're actually just going down a path of ugly bad news. And that's just on the quality of the idea. That still doesn't tell you if the business is properly built or if the founders are decent people, etc.
Yeah, that definitely gave me like more clarity on like your perspective on it. The three things, like you said, is it physically possible? Does the customers actually say it's easy and, great to use? And then
Yeah.
last is the team. So going back to your question that you were asking, right? Like, how does all of these like finance VCs who've never done anything in their industry, like how on earth did or do they know how to invest in founders? So I'm curious on your thoughts on like, so how big do you think the team is? The factor, as in like they believe that, as long as the teams are good, they can pivot, an insane amount of times and they will get there no matter what because of the team. So how much do you weight the factor between your contrarian way of thinking and the team factor?
I would say the way we need, and again, I don't know how other VCs do it. I have a hunch, particularly for early stage, but by the time we get involved, we need to be comfortable that as a team, they are all on the same page. So they're singing from the same hymn sheet. There's not like one person who says, I'm going to go that way and the other one wants to go another way, and that they have a fundamental understanding of how the market works and how they are going to grow in that market. And not just how, but probably that they can do a large part of it leading it. Now, I think a key thing is the stage we talk to these businesses, everything has to be about selling product. Whatever they're making, it's about how am I going to make it at the price I can sell it, and how am I going to do that as quickly and as large scale as possible. It's a very different kind of thing, I think. If you look more at seed, if I put my sort of cynical hat on, if I see the amount of money going to obviously bad ideas, but where the bad idea comes in the form of a startup led by a almost evangelical sort of power figure who is really good at raising money, my cynical self says, well, yeah, but the value of that business is in no way defined by the potential to sell product. It's all about how much money can they raise. And I think that's so like pivoting. I mean, pivoting I find is as bizarre, and this is not BC language, I'm aware of that. I find it as bizarre as this sort of whole product market fit thinking. I mean, someone's sitting there asking for money and saying, we're going to develop a technology with no idea who to sell it to. I mean, it's fine, but not my money. In my world, a business starts because they've understood what problem they're going to solve. And pivoting means you've not understood what problem you're solving. And product market fit means you're developing a technology without even knowing there's a market for it. So those two things are that is like the biggest sort of put down for me. And in a way, also an example of, you can make a case, this is probably not the most efficient way of developing new companies or developing new technologies and companies that become successful. I've never done any maths, and there's probably people who have written articles about this, but what is really the success chance of a new technology coming up through a startup versus just a small medium enterprise that's already doing something else, switching into a new tech? Because that's how it went like most of the time, and still does probably on most places on earth. Probably most patents are registered by existing companies, not by startups. So it's a bit of I find that the whole domain has some perverse elements to it, to say the least.
Yeah. And that's so legit. It's like rationally, right? Just literally logically, you're just like, okay, if I'm gonna put my money in something, I want something that's already proven. I want something that, the customer says is really great to use and easy to use. I want to make sure it's not physically impossible because that means that I'm almost, impossible to get my money
Yeah.
back. Like
Yeah.
logically,
But
what you're saying
yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it doesn't even need to be like 100% proven. But I mean, I've
Yeah.
done only a small amount of seed investment myself because we don't do it with Una Terra, but at least it's crystal clear the problem exists and there's a clear problem to solve. I mean, I honestly don't see without that how you could even go close. And maybe, yeah, I don't know, maybe for some people it's easy because they don't go in with their own money, but with someone else's money. In practice, we're putting as much of our own money almost in some of these cases as we are the fund's money. So we need to be pretty sure. I'd rather see all of these businesses succeed rather than making an assumption that if we do 10 investments, one will be in unicorn and the rest will go bankrupt. I mean, that seems to be the model at a lot of other VCs, which I wonder if that's particularly healthy. So yeah, just imagine if you're one of those businesses. It's you're these poor little startups. They are the chips on the table. They're probably not aware of that all the time. And then if you look at then the fund managers like ourselves, we are also chips on the table of an even bigger sort of universe who puts their money into funds to see which ones get the returns and which ones don't. They're all making their calculations on managing the risk.
Yeah.
Everyone's part of
And
someone else's hustle, probably in the end.
And that's the thing, right? Is that this world is a circular economy. So I know that to keep up with all this knowledge, right? Like you've got to be reading and learning constantly. As someone on the investment side of things, like what does your typical day look like? Like choose a day in your calendar, maybe last week, maybe this week, and then tell me 9 a.m. I do that. It's like 8 a.m. I wake up.
Well, don't forget, we're all a bit older than the typical sort of young startup, so we don't do things at the pace young kids do this. I have and this is true for a few people on the team. Probably two-thirds, three-quarters of my time is related to Una Terra in some form or other. It's either working on an investment memo of a deal we're working on, or talking to scale-ups that come our way and that we look up because we think they're interesting and we're looking. Are they looking for investment? And that is literally calls scattered around the day. And I also still have a bit of work happening, let's say, in the old world. It could be consulting work, could be something like that. I also just meet a lot of people just for the sake of meeting them because I enjoy being around professionals in the domains that I enjoy being. And that as a whole gives me confidence navigating these worlds. I do read books. I read quite a lot, not like VC business books, stuff like that all the time, but but I do just read about business in general. I also spend quite a lot of time, this might sound surprising, going down all kinds of rabbit holes just to, yeah, but I mean, here's the thing, the VC space is a bubble with lots of bubbles inside. If I would have done and put my money in whatever, for example, on LinkedIn is presented as the hottest companies and the flavor of the day, I would have lost all my money, like all of it, and quickly. So you cannot trust what you're hearing from that one and single bubble. You have to expose yourself to different shades of what that domain is about. So I spent time talking to, even just last week, we spoke to two businesses who came to us, and we might engage in conversation with them, but they come with a proposition which sounds, we're turning CO2 into protein. And then when I'm saying, okay, so what is that? Is that a plant? Is that like algae or a microbe? How does this work? And then they explain it's just basically a microbial process. It's not rocket science at all. And it's all about sort of navigate. Anyway, so that's on the one hand. I'm thinking, oh, okay, it sounds interesting. Could be interesting if I can replace all kinds of egg white products and things like that. But I also talk to people who actually work for the, say, $50 billion food companies and sort of say, okay, what's going on in your life? And sort of how, and just to get a sense, even if I would never introduce the two to each other, I might, but it's not like the goal. It's just getting a sense of where's in the Venn chart am I hearing the things that are true for both worlds, because they will be giving me what is ideal in their own spaces with very conflicting, let's say, or pretty conflicting end goals. One wants to grow a company and sell it. The other wants to buy good product and make a career out of selling good end user products. Is there an overlap? And from that point of view, I can only recommend getting out of because the bubble is going to come after you anyway. If you have if you're running a startup or you're part of an accelerator or whatever. You're going to be invited to every event under the sun to present your stuff and win awards and whatever. I mean, stay away from it as much as you can because it's not going to give you much new. No. I mean, even one of the businesses we're investing in now, they went down. I mean, they've come back, thank God. But all the co-investors who were already in that business said to us, yeah, they've maybe been picking up too many rewards recently. And of course, in their world, that's great. Ah, we're winning awards. But no, in the end, are you selling product? You better spend time traveling to see customers than another award ceremony. That's the reality. So sorry, I mean, it's a little bit all over the place as an answer, but I really enjoy personally, and I know this is pretty true for the other guys on the team as well, is to just have feet in different bubbles, knowing there are bubbles. And let me give you an example how valuable this can be. In Europe, the domain of circular economy, better for planet investing, so typically, I guess, well, definitely by US standards, it's a very left-wing, left-oriented sort of space because it feels like you're sort of it's very altruistic and you're doing it for the better, for the goodwill of everyone, and it's definitely not too businessy. Am I making a crass generalization here? But that is, I think, generally true. The way this domain looks at Trump and the U.S. is as evil, something bad that has come through the system, and hopefully it'll go away soon. Now, without even going into the politics of this, what is happening is two things that are actually happening. Europe and US are moving further apart, just like Europe and China and Russia are moving further apart. The globalization forces are becoming deglobalization forces. Now, that tells you something important in the context of circular economy and supply chains and how things are made is you're probably going to have to do it more locally. It's a very important element, very simple. So that becomes a consideration, whether you are left wing, right wing, or whatever wing. Probably looking for technologies that allow shorter supply chains is good. The ones that are requiring huge supply chains or markets everywhere to work, not good. It's a very simple thing. But on a smaller level, in the wake of Mr. Trump came Mr. R.F. Kennedy, who is doing his whole Make America Healthy Again. And you can agree or disagree with what he's doing, but one thing he's doing, which I find very interesting, is he said no more artificial colorants in food. We need to clean up our food recipes again across, and he has a point. Now, put those two together. What are food ingredients that actually move away from the sort of petrochemical base that you would typically see and also allow you to make supply chains shorter? That's a very interesting domain all of a sudden, which again, whatever political color you have, whatever, say, shade of wanting to improve the world you have, it tells you some very specific things that will make the difference between a good investment and a bad one. We've recently, last deal we closed before Christmas was with a business who do a natural colorant based on cellulose, which there was kind of the proof came immediately when we started talking to them is they have a huge demand from the US to start making the stuff locally because it can replace a very ugly colorant no one wants in their food recipes anymore. And you're talking about literally $1 trillion industry in food who all need color in their product. Because what they do see is if you put no colorant in a product, it becomes a very, very bland one very quickly. And again, so it's I'm just showing what I believe, and I think this is something we live and breathe at Terra is just being connected, as grounded as possible, you could say, in the real world, and not be guided too much by the narratives that happen in whatever bubble you happen to find yourself moving through. So
Wait, is that example of governance that you talked about? How you say like circular economy and sustainable materials, and then there's like a cycle of governance. There's also culture and nature. Is that
yeah,
governance? Okay, awesome.
yeah. But these are all different levels at which you can think about what you're doing as a VC or as an investor and how that interacts with the world of startups and scale-ups you're looking at. And I think everyone will have their ways of making themselves comfortable on whether or not to engage with a particular, let's say, business to invest in them. But I think the way we operate in this requires multiple levels like that. Also because we know the spaces we're in, these are such mature industries. The only way they work is if you have pretty significant volumes. These are not niche products or niche categories and even a niche, you can find a big niche, of course, but it's, we want to, maybe a crass way of saying it is it's better to improve 10% a billion times than 50% a million times. So it's a way of looking at the world around you. So if you can make paper cups, everyone drinks their coffee in paper cups all day long, probably use multiple cups a day. These are not paper cups. They're actually laminates. There's a lot of plastic in. If you can improve that by 5% or even just 1%, you're making such a huge difference versus someone who creates a perfect paper cup, which has no plastics in and only sells a few 100,000. And so it's picking fights you can win, but picking then the big ones that are where a small gain makes all the difference.
Yeah, and that's so true. It's like, for example, you've got like factories in China or Taiwan, right? Like you're
Hmm.
like, okay, why are these, products so affordable? There's like apps like Temu where it's like, $2 for this entire fan. How on earth is that even possible? But the reason why it's possible is because of the amount of volume that they actually pump out within those
Hmm.
factories. So it's just insane, how you can either go the volume route or maybe you can go like the highest quality route. But within that, there's always like different factors that you have to learn about. And that's what you did, right? Like you say
Yeah.
like, like meeting these people, the agency is not a part of Terra, but it truly is. It's like your way of maybe even deal sourcing, maybe even like understanding that knowledge of, okay, so which companies are, the actual right one. So could you dumb it down? I know you're a natural at this, but could you dumb it down for like, for example, aspiring VCs wants to start building relationships with uh VCs, in the industry?
So VC, well, I guess my advice, to the degree I can give advice, is pick a few topics, one, two, or three, which you just want to know everything about. And it could be because you want to invest in these topics. So if it's digital, it could be all about, I don't know, social, it could all be about speed of infrastructure, it doesn't matter, or security, and just see if you can spend time talking about those topics with people who work on these things on a daily basis, and ideally not in startups, but like in already in established businesses, because that does a couple of things. You learn very quickly, but also every time you have a conversation. So let's take a crazy example. I'm going to make it a little bit crazy just to show how it works. So I mentioned this before, egg white. Egg white is in a lot of food products that you consume. It is a category which is huge and therefore interesting. Now, I had 3 conversations about egg white in the space of a week. And what I learned was, first of all, there are quite a few ways of making a product that is chemically similar to the egg white that literally comes out of the eggs that you get out of a chicken. I've also learned how volatile the egg industry is with like this, because it runs on such tight margins and such tight, let's say, chains. Is the moment something sort of flutters, like there is a flu amongst birds or whatever, and there's a part shut down, it immediately affects the price and everyone gets into trouble. Now, I did not have the same conversation 3 times. I had different conversations, but I took into every conversation what I'd learned in the previous one. So that means I don't need to talk again about the stuff I already know, but also I share with the person I'm talking to the things I've learned. I'm not sharing confidential stuff, of course, but things I've already picked up, and they get an immediate sense, oh, this guy has sort of spoken about this before. He understands sort of how this works, comes with an interesting perspective, because I also, of course, connect it to other things that I've heard. And before you know it, like 3, 4 conversations on, I now look very differently at every sort of alternative protein egg white providing, say, startup than I would ever have done before. And there's not a book in my library that could have taught me this. So, and this is true across everything. But what it particularly requires is going into these conversations with a complete sort of open visor, as you would say in Dutch, as in you don't go in with an agenda of, I have to convince this person to invest, or I need to explain that I have a solution to their problem. No, it's open conversation. And imagine if you have 5 to 10 such conversations a week, or even only 5 a week, like one a day. An interesting conversation with a knowledgeable person about a topic you are both interested in. And you string these together, within a matter of months, you will know so much about a particular space. And you will also be seen by the people you talk to as in, wow, this person has sort of thought this through. It becomes a self-perpetuating thing. Say when you're literally in a consulting domain, which we were with the agency before, we spent like over a decade, literally just sort of business consulting, innovation, sort of big stakes projects. We were we were dependent on businesses giving us briefs. But if you just call up a company and say, hey, do you have an interesting brief for us? Of course they'll say no, because it's just what is the chance of you calling a potential customer that they happen to have a project for you just when you're calling? The chance is 0. But If you call and say, listen, you won't believe what I heard on egg white or on whatever other topic I've just happened to be talking about on, say, in the previous agency life, it would have been innovation. You have an open conversation and you learn things back and forth and you're top of mind again of that business. So when they do have a brief, they call me or the person they've recently spoken to. There is this very non-linear element, I think, is what I'm trying to say, Joe, which is immersing in a topic by talking to people who matter in the topic, and again mixing as many different bubbles as you can. And you'll be just like you sent me an email and said, yeah, sure, I'm happy to talk about VC, see what I can learn talking to you. You'll be surprised how open many people are to just have a chat. So if you are looking to break into this space, well, where do you need to gain knowledge? What are the kinds of friends you need to make? And start planning some calls, approaching people, see who wants to talk and who doesn't, and give the sense that you can have a meaningful exchange.
Yeah, and the really important thing that, Kosa literally just said is the fact that you kind of just like niche down, right? You niche down into some specific industries that
Yeah,
you want to be a part of, and then you talk to the professionals first. Like, you don't really need to talk to the VCs first. Even if you want to become a VC in that industry,
yeah,
you can talk to the professionals first. So then you have the insider knowledge on what is most important, what is most recent, what is most urgent in that type of industry. And when the VC is like, okay, wait, how on earth does this person also know this insider
yeah,
information? They're gonna be more like way more
yeah,
inclined to talk to you
yeah.
than
And maybe
anyone else.
absolutely. And there's some sort of basic conversation techniques in there, which are as old as humanity. But it's don't ask what people want. I mean, that's the dumbest question you can ask. What do you want? People don't know what they want, but just have a conversation and sort of hint for and listen for what are frustrations they are expressing in the language. Because they don't. The only thing they want is whatever they can visualize as an answer. What you want to get to is what problems do they have? Because then you have a whole open field of the types of solutions you can find. This is true whether you're looking at consumer products. This is true whether you're looking at business to business solutions. This is true in every domain almost in life, is if you can get to a point you understand from each other what issue you need resolving, then you could say the more expert of the two in the kinds of solutions that are out there can start thinking about, I think I have something that might solve your problem, because you were saying you were frustrated with this, and I think this will reduce the frustration you have. Whereas if I just ask, what do you want? So, I mean, it's like the classic case from Mr. Ford when he launched the Model T Ford. He said, well, if I'd asked people what they want, they would have just said a faster horse. They had no concept of a car, which was what I was working on. And this is going to be true all over, let's say, innovative fields, where, of course, most of VC happens, is you're all working on pretty far out solutions to problems that might, to some people, seem unsolvable. Well, turns out they are solvable.
Yeah. And that's a simple way of, what do they want? Even in daily life, right? Personal life, it's like, wait, what do I truly want? You don't really know that because there's so much possibilities. But then you can always say, like, what do I not want? Like, what am I frustrated with? Like you said, and you can literally instantly you can instantly literally just like see, okay, I don't want this in my life. I want to do better on this a little bit because this happened or whatever. You can think of it like right away. So maybe a way is like Kosa said, so just like what are you frustrated with, right? That's during the conversation with the professional. And if you find those frustrations, you dig deeper into it, you try to understand more into it, and then to maintain that relationship, right? I would
Yeah, yeah.
assume that if they're frustrated, like Kosa said, then just give them the solutions that maybe come along your way when you're talking with other professionals or online you found something, right? So if you did the research afterwards and maybe they know that they don't want something, but they just never did the research to solve that problem. If you kind of did the research, maybe it'll take a bit of time, right? But still, you are helping that person. And at the end of the day, once you talk to all those professionals and then you talk to the VC and the VC is like, wait, my founders have the same problem. You can actually start to introduce the professionals to those portfolio founders. And then they're like, wait, this guy's already a VC.
Yeah, there's so many angles to this, Joe. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
and the one thing everyone hates is being sold to. People hate being sold to.
Hmm.
So that's one thing to not do. Actually, my fellow founder of the agency way back when, Mark, He had a great sort of opening sort of line almost with when he would sit down for coffee, even if it's like just a 20-minute coffee break with one of our clients. So where are you winning and where are you losing, my friend? And it's such a nice way to open because, of course, you talk first of all, these are things are going well, and that could be personal, could be in the business, and where are you losing? Yeah, it's this again. Mark would always then walk away, and I would use that line too, and you'd walk away. I don't know what the solution is yet, but at least I know where he's losing. And if I do come across, if I have it simmer for a while in my head and think, I could just call back like a week later, say, listen, you said this was an issue. I've just been thinking X, Y, and Z. And they would say, yeah, let's talk about that then. And so but again, I guess what it isn't is just jumping to conclusions all the time and being under this sort of, like you're under the gun where you just have to sort of deliver all the time. There'll be enough topics you'll need to deliver on all the time, but gaining knowledge is not something you can necessarily accelerate. And that just takes some time. But it's again, this was probably someone, I don't know who said it, but it's not about what you can do in a week. It's about what you can do in a year. And that is probably what you can do in a week is always disappointing, but what you can do in a year is pretty dramatic. I mean, there's a lot. That's a long period of time.
Yeah, and I think this is really great for founders as well, right? Whereas if you kind of just start a startup or a company and then you kind of want to update your VCs, but maybe you don't have VC investment or angel investment or anything yet, but every single, week or every single day, you write a little memo. And I like to tell founders this too, like, what are you winning today? What are you
Hmm.
losing at today? And then you write your, like, what do I need to do tomorrow? And
Yeah.
that's it. It's so simple. But then when
Yeah.
the VCs see your thought process, they're so much more likely to invest. I've seen that, founders probably get like 2 or 3 times easier investment when they literally documented this entire diary down. So I know you talked a little bit about how to break into VC. For our viewers who needs a plan to implement right away, just to start, like just to
Yeah.
start, what would be your 6-month plan to break into VC for maybe industrial
Breaking.
engineers or tech founders?
Yeah.
Say
So,
months
so
1, 2, 3, 4,
yeah, month one, two. I think
just to start.
yeah, if you are still a relatively young person, under 30 or under 35 even, and you want to go into this space, is find an internship, find a way to work inside an existing VC just to see how it happens. What is all the stuff? And just go with the flow. And then after that, you can make up your mind whether you like it or not, whether you like the industry or whether and if you do, if you like how the VC you were in operates, or if you have different ideas on how to do this. If you're more sort of the sort of half of your career, like we were, I think there is no 6-month program. It just starts on day zero. Do you see an interesting deal? Have you come across a business you think I want to put my money in that business? Because you'll have a million other things to do if you're not, say, investing. That's the benefit of being an old dude or an old lady. There's enough to do. But the moment you see an interesting business where you say, actually, oh, I know they're going to succeed because, and whatever the reasoning is, I want to get enough money into them, more than I have myself. Then you've effectively started. This is how it went for us. We put in more money than we had ourselves. We put a big chunk of our own cash in, and we collected cash from somewhere else. Did, I think, what you would call a club deal, and that became our first investment. Built an SPV, put all the money in, gave it to this business, and we did really well off it. Then, I mean, the decision to then set up an actual fund and get it registered, in our case in Luxembourg, which is a huge pain in the ass, but that in a way is secondary to that decision of I am going to put a significant amount of cash, and because I'm putting cash from other people into this business who I'm going to convince to do it as well, I'm also going to put my reputation on the line. That is sort of a day zero decision, which is a almost black and white. There's no way back once you've done it. So yeah, what can I say? I mean, I wish, but that just simply wasn't possible. I wish it would have been a slow 6-month period for us that we could say, okay, let's spend some time talking to VCs and what they say. No one's going to tell you exactly how it is because you're like competition. And I'm not going to work for a VC. I mean, you don't do that at my age anymore. You sort of dive in head first. And of course, over time, so like last year, Natalia, one of the new partners, came on board, who has a lot more experience in the space and knows all the sort of the nuances that as original founders we couldn't really know because we don't come from the industry. But that's way past the day zero, the decision to move into this. So I'm afraid so I can give you two programs, Joe. I can give you sort of the 6-month sort of go work for a VC and just see it from the inside, and then make up your mind: do you want to do this, and do you do it the current way, or do you do it in your own way? And then there is the just diving in head first because you found a great deal and you can could find access to some cash to put into the business, because then you've already started and you sort of have no, there's no decision to make anymore. Does that answer your question? It's maybe not a beautiful step plan, but it's what I can give you.
Especially for like young people, right? You first actually have to know if you want to do it or not. Like if you don't
Yeah.
want to do it, just cross it out like after a couple months and then,
Yeah.
move on to something different. So that's so legit. And then in terms of career professionals, they're kind of established already. I think really, like you said, the first and best and fastest way is through maybe angel investing, maybe SPVs. But at the same time, it can't just be like, hey, I'm gonna put 10K in, but I wouldn't want my friend to invest in this. It has to be like, okay, this is a company that I just really, really want to invest in. I would put my reputation down on.
That's a
Because if you would put your reputation down on it, then that's how you know you've got a great company. Okay, so for
absolutely.
for a few rapid fire questions to wrap up, a few words or a sentence. Ready?
Yeah, sure, sure. Bring it on.
If you could invest in any startup from the past, which one would it be?
What I missed, you mean? Oh yeah, there was a
Well,
business.
any from the
Yeah, there was a
past.
business. Oh man, there was a business called Re4 who came our way just too soon because we didn't have the fund ready and we just had no access to money. They made okay, this is going to sound geeky. They made a polypropylene alternative to laminate cardboard, which was drop-in technology, which was actually recyclable, and I would have given them my money if I had any left. But I put all my money already into other investments, and we couldn't raise it in the network at the time. So yes, that would be one example. But probably if I think longer, I can give you 10, because there are plenty of good companies who didn't survive because they just couldn't raise in time, or who found other ways to continue inside other organizations. But that was one immediately. Re4 was the name, Danish company.
Oh my God. Wait,
Torsten was,
what did it
yeah.
go to? Did it go IPO?
No, for IPO, no way. They, I think they sold into a smaller company, which was already sort of in a similar space, and they became like the innovative product for that company. No, but because you're talking about a company in this case, they were probably looking to raise like $1 million or something. Not even that much, but it was in 2022 when here in Europe, the Ukraine crisis had just started. You could say with like a nuclear winter, there was no money for anyone anywhere. It's incredibly hard to get. So sorry, it's a long answer to your question. It was supposed to be quick fire. I'm sorry.
I like it. I like it. So, favorite place to travel, but haven't yet.
But I haven't yet. I've been almost everywhere. Oh my God, that sounds awful. Where would I still love to go? I would still love to go very far north and see the northern lights. That's one thing I have never seen in my life. And I would probably, so there's two places. I would like to see the northern lights. I would also like to go up one of those really, really high mountains in South America, like in Peru, to be able to get a proper view of the Milky Way at night, which is almost impossible everywhere else.
Even with telescopes?
It's something that I've got a glimpse of it when I was in New Zealand once, but just standing on the top of a mountain and with the air being so clean and no clouding and so dark that you can see the band of the Milky Way. I mean, it's sublime. I mean, there's nowhere in the Western world with all the light pollution that you can actually experience it. You have to go like properly remote. So those are two remote destinations. It's probably telling you something about where I'm still yearning to go.
Yeah, man. When I visualize that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that just sounds so amazing.
It's that
Okay.
you feel so small, so small.
And then, what is one fun fact about you that most people don't know?
One fact about me. Oh, so I have a picture of it, which I don't think we're recording video, but I'll describe what it is. This is a really funny thing. Actually, quite a few people know this about me, but I have competed in the World Championship wife carrying. That's my wife on my neck there, which is a totally crazy thing to do. We've done it twice, and that's maybe if there's anything I can dare give advice on, because I don't really like the idea. I give this advice actually when I do guest lectures to young students, is just don't forget to find love. It's so easy to get caught up in the hectic, because it's a hectic phase of your life when you're still in your 20s, sort of figuring life out. What am I going to do? Where's my little sort of niche in the planet? And just don't forget to hook up with a person, because that's what's going to make it an enjoyable ride all the way through the time you get like my age and even older, is doing it with another person. So don't forget that. That's my sort of my view on life.
Did you guys have Valentine's Day yesterday as well?
We
In
did, but yeah, we didn't really, we didn't celebrate it. I mean, we've been married for 25 years. We have, as my
every
wife
day is
says, it's
Valentine's
Valentine's
Day.
Day. Every day is Valentine's Day. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, is there any thoughts that you want to finish or we didn't get to cover on this pod that you would like to talk about?
No, it's, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking about this. I guess just, and I've said it in different ways, I guess, already during the time we had together, but is just move around the different bubbles. be aware, whatever you think your working environment is, it is a bubble with a very particular, let's say, view on how the world works or how the space, the topic you're interested in, how it works. And find time, force yourself to have the time to move around different bubbles, professional bubbles probably, or semi-professional, to just really figure out how some of these things work, because they will give you the edge to spot what the new thing is coming down the line. It's like we talked about music. I mean, if musical instruments and something like that is your interest, then on the edge of that is places where instruments are made, and on the edge of that is material science. What's going on? And for sure, you will not be bored. You will be inspired when you start sort of moving around those and seeing connections. That's what this is about. And I can only wish everyone luck, because there's more than enough to do. It's not like any one success is at the detriment of someone else. It's a feast. And if you are still at the beginning a little bit, age-wise, I mean, you're clearly wiser than your age suggests, Joe, but you have a curious outlook on the world, and I can recommend that as something to keep for everyone also listening to this podcast. Stay curious.
That was amazing, Costas. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about you or your firm, what is the best place to reach you?
LinkedIn, without doubt. Just get in touch on LinkedIn, and we can talk from there. It's where I post a lot and where I am easy to find.
And for the aspiring VCs listening to this, does your fund have a VC internship program or hiring for roles right now?
Well, we've just taken on an intern/analyst who hopefully will stay on board. We don't have a fixed program. We are too small for that still, but keep an eye on Terra, because we have an interesting universe we sit in with some of our anchors who are very active in this domain. So check out the website and check me out on LinkedIn or the Terra LinkedIn page. Follow that to stay in the loop.
Yeah. And out of everyone you know, who are two amazing VCs that you would recommend as future guests to our podcast?
I will. Do I need to say that now, or can I take a rain check on that and send you an email? I need to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you
Okay.
again, and thanks to everyone who's listening.
With pleasure.
Comment question you want to hear from our guest or Costas. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to press the subscribe button, like, and share with someone who's interested in getting into venture. We'll see you next time on Break into VC.